Well, joining me is Dylan Postl, who played Hornswoggle, the leprechaun, in WWE between 2006 and 2016, and by the podcaster and commentator James Barr. All right, James, you've got no problem with what Disney are doing. You think this is progressive and inclusive, and all those moaning about it should shut up.
I think you should live in the 1930s, actually, Piers, because that's where you belong, really, listening to what you were just saying then. Also, I'm going to quote Warwick Davis, because he said he finds it patronising when people are offended on his behalf. And you've just spent a 5-minute monologue being offended on his behalf. And I think that's ridiculous.
Well, let me bring in Dylan, because Dylan is also offended, and he happens to be a dwarf actor. Dylan, I've got to say, I was very curious when I saw what Peter Dinklage came out and said, because I did wonder who appointed him the head of the dwarf actor community. And it turns out nobody did other than him. And the people who, it seems to me, who've really suffered in all this are the 6 dwarf actors who would have expected to have roles in this remake in a massive Hollywood blockbuster, who are now not going to have that experience, or the money, or the fame that may have come with that. What is your response to that?
So it's not a progression at all to me. My issue with it is exactly what you said. There are actors, dwarf actors, that live, that dream to be in a major motion picture such as this Disney remake. And now, because Peter Dinklage said what he said last year, now it's taken away. And it's taken away because of quote unquote progression and all that. And it's not right. Because these are roles made for actors of my stature. Roles that aren't ever really given. I can't go out for the Harrison Ford or the George Clooney roles because that's not for me. These dwarf roles are for people of my stature.
Right.
And now it's taken away. I don't feel that's right. And not only that, but now think about the additional stunt actors or body doubles or that. Now you're talking multiple actors of my stature that don't get these major roles. And why? What's the reasoning? Because we're supposed to be progressive and we're supposed to just not view them as that?
Well, you know the
these
irony.
Were heroes. All of these dwarves, all of these dwarves took care of Snow White.
Right.
They all had characteristics, separate characteristics. They weren't these cave-dwelling monsters that people speak of. They all had 7 different characteristics for 7 different actors that from my community, and I don't feel it's right that got taken away from us.
And utterly agree with you. And the irony is that they profess, these progressives, to want to do this to protect you, right? They protect dwarf actors from being, you know, somehow smeared. But you don't feel that way at all.
Peter Dinklage spoke up about this. And that was my issue. He had in the past no issue cashing checks that were made for dwarf roles like Elf and all of that. Yes, he blew away the barriers when he did his roles that weren't necessarily made for a dwarf. But the Elf role was made for a dwarf. That check cleared just fine. So now that he's gone and done that, the progression of dwarf actors, it just doesn't sit right with me.
No,
that this guy who is exactly what you said, what gave him the voice for all of our community?
Yeah,
why?
I was honest. I think
a complete hypocrite. Let me bring James back in. So
when
James,
Piers Morgan is agreeing with you, I think you need to be concerned. I'll say that for the.
So you're telling the dwarf actor what he should feel.
Having
literally just lectured me about speaking for someone in the dwarf community, Warwick Davis, you now accuse a dwarf actor.
No, it's not what I said. I said that if you're siding with anyone, you've got to worry.
Right.
What I'd like to say actually is that I kind of mostly agree with what you're saying.
And now Sir, that's just taking a pot shot there.
No,
it
is absolutely taking a pot shot. But I do agree with what you're saying. I completely agree with your point of view, and I think that's really important. But I can only speak from my experience, and as a gay man, I know that growing up, I witnessed gay people being villains in movies when I was
7 dwarves aren't villains.
And that I think stereotypes are really important to
What stereotype do you think
and
they
actually,
represent?
in the universe of Snow White, wouldn't it be better if dwarves
I don't feel this isn't a part of this about the stereotype.
Right.
This is about roles that were made for people of my stature that don't have the chance to go out for other roles normally.
But you, James
So
Barr,
why are we
you want to
taking-
stop Dylan
I am
getting
not,
a role in a Hollywood
Piers, I
film.
am not going to get into an attack on a dwarf.
You don't want a dwarf actor to
No, I
land
do.
a role
I do,
playing
actually.
a dwarf part.
Listen, a
Why?
dwarf can play a dwarf part, but I think it's important to change narratives that don't fit in today's society. And really, it
Which
might
is
be
that
better.
narrative?
It might be better
What's the-
if dwarves
sir-
just exist
sir,
in
pardon
normal
me.
roles everywhere,
What's-
because they do exist.
What was
in
so
real
bad about
life.
the way dwarves were depicted in Snow White? Have I missed something?
Well, listen, I'm not here to talk about...
That's what I'm kind of wondering as
well,
well.
I don't
Tell us.
represent Disney, but I'm just saying I think I see their point of view.
What's their point of view? What was so bad about the depiction of the dwarves?
Why are you
What's the
so
point of view?
upset about a movie changing with the times and moving forward?
Because
to
I think that
2023?
honestly, with
Is
great
this really,
respect,
there is real news we could
with
be
great-
discussing.
No, but this is real news if you're a dwarf actor who are now out of work because of virtue signaling idiots.
But you're just
who
using
think that
this-
everything has to be rewritten
You are just
to be
using Dylan
inclusive,
as a cheap
when in
shot.
fact it's not inclusive at all.
No, you're using Dylan as a cheap shot to attack a wokey. That's
I
what's
don't think
happening.
Dylan feels I'm using him as a cheap shot. And what I would say about the wokey thing is this. I have spent the last year listening to people tell me only gay actors should play gay parts. Only Welsh actors, so Michael Sheen, should play Welsh characters. And so on and so on and so on.
Conversations are nuanced.
But the moment we have dwarf roles, which are the most famous dwarf roles in Hollywood history, then the only people apparently who can't play them are dwarf actors.
weren't dwarf
and I
roles.
see there
It's a cartoon,
stinking
Piers.
woke
So
hypocrisy.
It has not changed. It was a cartoon. Those weren't actually dwarfs in the movie. They were drawn, okay? So firstly...
They were
that's
drawn
just
as
absolute-
dwarfs.
No, that is...
But it's a
literally-
story
They're
about
called
dwarves, sir.
dwarfs.
Well, they
It's a
shouldn't be
story
called that.
about
They should be
dwarves.
called...
They shouldn't be called dwarfs.
No, they should be called people with dwarfism.
They shouldn't be called.
What's wrong with being
They shouldn't be
called
called
dwarves?
dwarves.
Nothing, but that's not the correct
That's the
term.
story.
Dylan,
The story
apparently
is
you should,
literally
you're not
Snow
allowed
White
to
and
call
the
yourself...
Seven
Dylan can call
Dwarfs.
himself whatever
Apparently,
he wants.
Dylan, you're not allowed to call yourself dwarfs, apparently.
I would love to hear, what should I call myself, sir?
I think you should call yourself whatever you feel comfortable with, but as a person...
He calls himself a dwarf.
Well, that's
A
great. then.
dwarf.
Good
Yeah.
for you. I'm happy.
So,
That's-
so now, sir, let me pause that. So it shouldn't be called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It should
Listen,
just be
I
called
do not want to
Snow
get
White.
cancelled
So are you
because I
saying-
think your point of view is more important than mine right now. But what I'm annoyed about is Piers trying to take a cheap shot at someone that believes in society moving forward.
Yeah, I'm actually
because really, if we
I'm
were
actually
to-
exposing the hypocrisy
It's
of
not-
the woke mentality of only gay people can play gay parts, only trans actors can play trans parts, and so on and so on and so on.
I think we want to
right
get
to the
to a
point,
place where
right to the
everyone
point.
can play
Snow
every
White and the
role.
Seven Dwarfs has to be cancelled because you're not allowed to have dwarf
You
actors.
should be happy, Piers, because it means that now you can play your dream role of Grumpy.
I would love to play Grumpy. I loved all the dwarves in that movie. They were great. Let me ask
now
you
you're
guys.
being a hypocrite.
Guys,
You'd love
here's-
to play
here's-
Grumpy, but
no,
you're
no,
taking
no,
a role
no.
away from a dwarf
The issue
actor.
at hand.
No, I would play a fully grown Grump
by
quite happily.
taking away a role from a
Let
dwarf.
me ask you, Dylan, about the Hugh Grant playing an Oompa Loompa, because again, it seems to me we've got a clip of him playing an Oompa Loompa. Let's have a look at this.
So you're the funny little man who's been following me.
I will have you know that I am a perfectly respectable size for an Oompa Loompa.
An Oompa what now?
Allow me to refresh your memory.
Oh, I don't think I want to hear that.
Too late. I've started dancing now. Once we've started, we can't stop.
So you're the funny little man who's been following me.
Now, they use CGI there, Dylan, to effectively make him into an Oompa Loompa dwarf.
So now-
what do you feel about that?
Yes, sir. So now we're not only using CGI and spending extra money and funding for these movies when we could just cast dwarves in that role. Whether it be one dwarf or multiple, that like they have been in the past. Now you're taking at least one role away or multiple roles away for Oompa Loompa characters. That's what they were in the past. And why, again, I go back to my stance on these roles in Hollywood in general are very hard for people of my community to get, besides the elf and the leprechaun and this and that. So why are they being taken from my community? That's my issue here.
Well,
It's
you know
not
why? You know
anything
why,
about
Dylan?
the stereotypes
You know why?
or
Because
anything.
people like James here, they think it's progressive and inclusive.
Nah,
when in
see-
fact it's
Those
regressive.
are not my words.
It's
actually.
regressive
Piers.
and
They
exclusive.
are your words.
Pierce,
Dylan?
Pierce, I will agree with the mindset of it's not right. I don't know. James seems to be in partial agreement with me on the dwarf actors and the roles with that these should be. But I don't, on the other stuff, I can't speak on that, obviously. I'm focused fully on the dwarf community really losing roles in these films.
Yeah, I think James
And
started.
with
James
all the
started.
SAG strikes, with all the writer strikes,
Yeah.
and
Well,
the actor strikes.
I do agree with
it's
you, and I
important-
think all I'm trying to say is that I think it's a nuanced conversation, and there's a few different points of view that are valid. And ultimately, in my experience as a gay man, the reason we're upset about gay people not getting gay roles in movies is because we're not getting straight roles as well. And until we are, it's unfair that those roles are taken away from us. So, in that respect,
What's that got to do with dwarf actors? Because they can't play regular-sized parts.
I think Peter Dinklage's original point is that he would like to see more dwarves in films in general, not just playing dwarfs.
in
wasn't
general.
what he said.
Literally, a person of my stature should be able to go out for the same as a 6'5", 200-pound human. But it's just not that way. And I'm okay with that. In reality, I'm okay with that. It's understandable to me. But when it's these roles that are made for people of my stature,
Yes!
that's where I have the issue.
You know what, Dylan? The movie, one of the great movies of all time, is called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. If dwarf actors in Hollywood are not picked to play those roles, I don't know what roles you're supposed to be playing. It's unbelievably patronising that they've done this under the banner of so-called progression.
And it's not, again, like I said, these dwarves in that movie or in this story aren't viewed poorly, I don't believe.
No.
They're all separate characters that are actually heroes for this lady.
Yes.
And they take care and they take this lady in.
They save
so they're
her.
viewed so well to society.
They saved the
that
woman.
Now
they're hardworking. They're wealthy. They are kind. They are generous-hearted. It's hard to think of a more positive narrative about any people at all.
Well, let's just go back to the 1930s, Piers. I think you'd be happy
You know what, James?
Blackface would exist still.
No, it's not blackface.
James,
it's not blackface. And what you're now doing, because you know you've lost the argument.
No, there's no argument.
And you know
here.
you've been embarrassed by the argument.
You're not embarrassed.
You are
embarrassed.
James just said.
An argument that doesn't
James,
exist.
Hold on, guys.
We agree with each other.
Please.
All right. You know what? You do agree with him
James,
now because you realise the futility of your argument.
James, you can't go and go, oh, you got to go back to 1930s. No, James, if you agree with what I'm saying,
I agree with what you're saying. I don't agree with anything that Piers.
Yeah, here's the thing, Dylan. Dylan, just to be clear.
He literally just said what I said, James.
Dylan, just to be clear, he doesn't agree when I say it, but when you say it, he agrees.
Because you're not a dwarf.
That right now, I'm not a dwarf, no. But that right there is the hypocrisy of the woke brigade. Dylan,
okay. So let me
just say, Dylan, I've got to let go, unfortunately.
Real quickly, please. Pierce, quickly.
Final word, Dylan.
Pierce, James, let me ask you this. So if a writer writes a piece on what I'm saying, is it wrong of them? Because essentially, that's the same as the words coming out of my mouth.
What? Yeah, but you're not saying that I am a woke hypocrite, and Piers is, and that's what I disagree with. Because I'm absolutely not. So when I'm saying I disagree with Piers, it's nothing to do with your...
We'll leave it there. Just to be clear, Dylan, he disagrees with what I say, but when you say exactly the same thing, he completely agrees with it.
You're
and that
so annoying.
is James Barr, right to a T. Dylan,
nonsense.
Fantastic having you on Piers Morgan Uncensored. You did such a brilliant job in highlighting why this is so ridiculous. Shame on Disney, and I hope you get another brilliant role very soon. I really do.
Well, I hope so too, and I hope that this really kind of resounds with how I feel.
Yeah.
And I don't speak for the whole dwarf culture and community, but this is literally
Piers
how I feel.
Piers Morgan speaks for the entire dwarf community.
I've got to leave it there, Dylan.
He speaks for all of you.
Thank you, Dylan, for joining me. James,
that's helpful, I think.
Thank you for joining me because
you're so welcome.
You came on and you beautifully highlighted the shocking
hypocrisy of woke culture.
of your culture.
Absolutely.